just, I think, envious of Martin's background right now.
He's
You
got
guys,
the best
you guys have the
backdrop.
new computers, by the way, so you can actually create unique backdrops. I have an older computer, and therefore I'm not allowed to do that in the Zoom feature.
A lot of people were like, did BMAC purposely put his head to have antlers on the back of his head?
I thought that too.
I've tried to negotiate some different angles like this one and such, but the lighting isn't as great. You know, there's a couple bear skulls, pig skulls, javelina skulls.
Kind of foggy.
Yeah, it is not as good for sure.
We'll have a better backdrop in my garage in a month or so.
We're working on it.
Yeah,
anyways, guys, welcome to the Hushlife podcast / video cast / whatever you want to call this during isolation. We really wanted to thank all of you that joined our first ever episode, kind of diving into the history of Hush. That was fun to walk down memory lane with Casey and Eric and kind of just find out where this all came from. We'll probably touch more on that topic down the road when Martin and Logan can chime in and discuss some of their experiences joining onto the team. But for today, we're going to talk shed hunting, all things shed hunting 101. If you've been following along with our YouTube videos, the shed tour is in full effect, and there's been some pretty fantastic ones that are just dropping and will continue to drop. But it's been going on for quite a while now. And this time of year, because of the nature of what we're doing, there are an overwhelming amount of questions concerning shed hunting. So today, Martin and Eric are going to dive into some of maybe some tips, some tactics. We got some questions that we've gathered from those of you who follow us on YouTube, Facebook, probably pull some in from the Instagram situation as well. And start us off. That's the topic today, guys. What are you feeling about shed hunting? Tell us all your secrets.
Like you said, it's a hot item. It's that time of the year. Our videos are dropping, and there is a lot of interest coming on all platforms. And there's a lot of people that are just getting started that seem to be asking questions. So I think we will go over some of those basic questions that BMAC has saved. And like you said, we got some questions coming in from Instagram, but yeah, shed hunting, man, probably, I won't say probably, my favorite thing.
Your favorite. Martin, we've talked about this before. It's right up there, right? Your top couple.
Yeah, probably between scouting and just like for anything like summer scouting and shed hunting. Those are my top two.
Real quick, walk us through your top 5 favorite things outdoor related, because I was kind of fascinated by this when we talked about it last summer. I think we were out in Wyoming scouting, matter of fact. Top 5.
So it would be, I think it was scouting for mule deer in the summer velvet. I love that.
Number one.
Yeah. Okay. Shed hunting would be 2, hunting elk in the rut with the bow 3. And then, do you remember the 4 and 5? I don't know if I remember those.
Those top 3 stood out to me.
Yeah.
Because nowhere in there do we talk about anything getting shot necessarily. Potentially elk number 3. Right. But I find it interesting that your number 1 most favorite thing to do is find mule deer in the velvet. And that'll definitely be a topic down the road because Martin's done a great job over the years of turning up some great bucks. And then number 2, shed hunting. So I thought that was interesting. I think a lot of people would have assumed, gosh, hunting mule deer or, taking elk or something like that would be 1 and 2, but it's not. So when did you start shed hunting?
I started in, I think it was high school, first year that I could drive, started shed hunting. Saw Eric posting on Instagram and then a couple other people I followed, and they were like the OGs, like the only ones doing it at the time. And so it kind of sparked an interest. I got out and started looking and found a few right away. And so the addiction started like pretty quick. I didn't get my butt kicked too much.
You got out early success.
Yeah, for sure. So I started there, and then really it just took off. Because I do like scouting and all of that and following animals, like that was a big part of success in shed hunting. So it went hand in hand and just turned into one of my passions.
Eric, what about yourself? Obviously, if anybody's followed along our channel or Eric individually, you'd notice that sheds are a big passion. Where does it rank on your top couple?
Shed hunting is number 1.
Number 1. You'd rather shed hunt than hunt anything else?
Yeah, because you get the thrill more, you know. Hunting is always fun, and chasing bulls with my bow would be second. Archery hunting elk in the rut, but the amount of like the high of finding a shed or spotting a shed, you just get over. It's unlimited. You don't tag out. You don't get a quota. You don't get that one tag and then your hunt's over. So probably for a lot of reasons why Martin likes summer scouting, because it's just nonstop. You get to go as much as you want. That's how shed hunting is for me. It's my favorite. Always has been. And honestly, shed hunting for me started way before hunting.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. When did that start for you? Like pretty early, wasn't it?
Yeah, pretty early. My dad grew up in Fillmore, Utah. It's like central Utah. And I, as a young child, we grew up in California. My family was right in the Bay Area, a city called Fremont, California. And he would take me, you know, we would visit his mom who lived in Fillmore for family reunions. And, you know, as I got a little older, he would take me on the hunt. But I just remember one time he took me to grandma's house. And in this little sliver of the house, which was currently, or at the time, a laundry room, that was his first bedroom. So she had a lot of kids, not a very big house. They used every square inch of that house they could. And he had a mule deer rack was still there. And I was just like, what is that? You know, it was a mule deer set of antlers. And at the time, you know, I was probably young enough to like watch National Geographic on TV, always loved animals, always had a lot of different pets, had a huge, just loved wildlife, thought it was really cool. So he had this rack sitting there, and it was his first buck that he had ever shot. And he shot it when he was 16. It was the only rack he had from growing up. So I was like, can I have that? You know, so he gave it to me, and it's the old timer style rack, a nice 4x4 with a clear coat of lacquer on it.
Oh yeah,
you know, like the old guys did.
Super old school. Yep.
So I just had that for years, and it wasn't until a couple years later, I was probably just a young teenager, 12 or 13. He took me on a hunt in Idaho, and I was hunting with his friend, and he goes, "Look over there. I think that's a moose shed." I'm like, whoa, what the heck? So like, you're not supposed to pull up the rifle, use the scope as optics. I'm like, that is a moose antler. And so that's when I found out and learned that the antlers were shed each year. And from that moment, I still have pictures of that set of moose antlers. When I discovered that they shed, and you can just simply go find them, from that moment on, shed.
You were hooked. It's interesting that you started out the creme de la creme with moose paddles as your first find.
You know, I remember when he found that one. We went walking up the ridge, and I actually stood on an anthill or a log. I can't remember, but whatever I stood on to get some elevation. I was still looking for elk, and he goes, "Whoa, look at that, the other side." And there was the other side of this moose paddle. And I just remember being a kid and being like, he'll probably give them to me. I'm a kid. Dude, he wasn't letting that thing go for nothing. It was a really cool set. And my dad found a moose paddle on that same hunt, which as soon as he got home, he cut it off at the burr to make a belt buckle. So I still have that paddle, and I still have the little piece that he never made a belt buckle. They're be in my collection forever. So that's how I started. And then at that time, we were living in Utah by then. He would take me up to the foothills of Salt Lake and literally just drop me off and be like, "I'll pick you up over there in a few hours." So I would just wander with, you know, like a lot of people are going to try to figure out from this podcast, is how do you get started? Well, that's how I got started. Just drop me off in the foothills and go.
So back then it was obviously not very strategic. It was just dad dropping you off, away you go.
And coming from my dad, who grew up, you know, in central Utah, where mule deer the numbers were probably incredible through his lifetime down there, finding a shed was easy. He's like, "Oh my gosh." We'd find a deer shed and put it in the bush so we didn't trip over it the next time. So yeah, he was just like, probably like thinking it's easy, like, just go hike around the hills, you'll find them. And I did. I actually did. And I remember the first shed I found, which I still have, a nice white burr sticking out of a sage bush, and it was a brown 3-point mule deer shed. And that's how it all got started for me.
Martin, how about yourself? How did you, obviously you said you kind of started in high school once you got your driver's license. Like, did your dad get you into it, or did you just see people on social media and kind of were inspired to try it?
Yeah, that's kind of how it was. Like I said, saw Eric and a few other friends I followed posting, and so I talked to my dad about it. I was like, hey, like, because we always would go out hiking together. So I was like, hey, let's go look for some sheds, just up here on the local mountains. And so we went up there and did some hiking, and like I said, honestly had some good luck right away. Found some elk and picked up a few browns. I remember the first one I found was in a thick oak brush patch, that taller oak that you can walk through. It's kind of canopy.
Yep.
And there was a big brown 6-point laying tines down. Went over, picked it up, did a couple circles, and the match was laying right there. So kind of spoiled. Like, it wasn't a moose shed like Eric, but my first sheds were a nice 6-point set, which I still have in the pile behind me.
That's pretty impressive.
So that was cool.
So for those of you listening, just through a traditional podcast method, you're not able to see what's behind Martin, but he has a giant pile of sheds. Appears to be a black bear, a bunch of deer. He's got the coolest backdrop for sure. Eric and I have just basic walls. But
Blank
so
wall.
that first initial 6-point was brown, and it's in that pile.
Yeah, not that pile. There's actually 3 other piles behind the couch here, and it's in one of those ones.
That's pretty cool.
But,
that's it's so super interesting because I know Casey and I always joke about this with you guys. And for the record, Casey and Logan are turkey hunting right now, so they're taking Casey's younger son Gage, and I think he actually just got his first turkey. I saw a post.
Yeah,
pretty cool. So that's sweet.
Yeah.
So, but Casey and I we don't have the same like fascination and love of shed hunting that you guys do, and obviously Eric describes it as this incredible high. Almost, I mean, I'm imagining it's something similar to like adrenaline dump or rush that you get when like you've got a bull calling in, or maybe you just shot a deer or something along those lines, where it's borderline like that kind of buck fever level of excitement. But it's hard to relate because neither of us have gotten into that. So I always think it's super interesting hearing you guys talk about like that high, that rush.
Yeah, it's like anything that you're out there for a purpose. You set a goal to find sheds, obviously. And so when you put the two together and you work hard and everything comes together and you spot that, it's like me and Martin talk about this all the time. Like that moment you spot it, make eye contact, you're like, you're mine. You have been found. Like you're going to be mine now,
Yeah.
It's just cool. And then as soon as you get that, you're already like, okay, I want that again.
Mm-hmm.
You're just never satisfied. You always want to go again. You get a pack full, you get home, you want to do it again. You want more.
Well, and it's so much dang work, like to find the things. Like there's so many times you've gone out 2 days maybe and you haven't found anything, put on 20 miles. And so it's an overwhelming sense of like joy and accomplishment once you do, like Eric said, lock eyes with that antler. It's like it is a high that you get right away, and it doesn't last long because then you want to get it again.
Sure. Let's talk about that for a minute, because I think with social media as a whole, like anything, there's kind of that perception and reality barrier going on. So I think oftentimes the perception that you might see when somebody posts like a giant stack of sheds or maybe a big set is that, man, that is so easy. Those guys are crushing it. Look at all those that they're getting. They must just have like access to like a honey hole, or they're just lucky, or what I mean. But the reality is, knowing you guys and knowing a lot of other people that are super passionate in shed hunting, there's a lot of work that goes into it. I think that perception and reality combination needs some clarification. So, well, I mean, on average, let's talk elk sheds specifically. What do you think the antler per miles ratio truly is over the course of a season?
Man, you have those days that you're getting 1 per mile, 1 per 2 miles average. But then you have those days, like Martin said, that are no antlers per miles. And those add up quick, because there are so many days where you go only finding either nothing or 1 or 2 for 15 miles. So it's hard to put a number on it, averaging it out like it really would be, but it's not that great. I mean, every time, like I've had days where I'm out there and I'm like, I did 15 miles, or I'll do a weekend. I'll do a whole weekend, 50 miles. I'll be like, okay, I'll think of what is 50 miles from my house.
Yeah.
And go, all right, Eric, there's 4 antlers. 2 of them are nice. 2 of them aren't that great. You're going to walk to, Spanish Fork to get them. Would you do it? And I'd look at you like, you're crazy.
Yeah.
But when you're out there, yeah, and those miles are stacking up, you're not really like adding it up. You're just out there trying your best. And in the moment, you'll just like, I'll do anything. I'll keep going. So yeah, I don't know what the average would be, man. It's hard to put a number on it.
Yeah.
Low.
Fair to say over 10 miles?
Probably 1 antler per 8 to 10 miles.
Yeah.
Average.
Yeah, I'd say that if you take everything into consideration, like when we do have those, like the series that's going now, we're finding probably 1 to 2 antlers per mile each of us. So it does look like you're killing it, but I've been out 2 times, 3 times in the last week, and I've only found a couple, like little small ones. So it's probably in the 5 to 10, 1 antler, 5 to 10 miles.
Yeah, I think that's, again, just sometimes what you see online doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. You just, you get a glimpse of somebody that maybe had a great day, or, they got into a little honey hole or something along those lines. But the reality is, and I get to see it firsthand, you guys are out really putting in a lot of effort to come up with the hope that you get some good ones, or you find that little pocket of a few, and then you never know what you're going to find. It could be super old. Yeah, obviously everybody wants the new ones, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. So let's talk some strategy, some tips, some tactics. I'm imagining, since you guys both started, a lot has changed, not only in the popularity of shed hunting, but just in the strategy on maybe how to get a leg up, how to find that spot that you guys have all dreamt of. So
yeah, I mean, people get lucky, right? Park the quad, just guess, walk up the hill, find a big set, find 5 browns. That doesn't happen very often anymore, especially with how popular it has become. Martin and I both have been doing it for years now. So we've collected a lot of knowledge based on areas we've done good. Some areas seem to produce year after year, and some just don't. It all is dependent on the snow levels, how the winter was, etc. But trying to find new places is trial and error, especially as a beginner shed hunter. I went through it all. I still go through it as we explore new country. But each time you go to a spot and it's not the zone, you just got to like check box that off as like, this isn't it. And you're one step closer to finding the zone. But there's so much strategy behind it now. Like we can go into all that.
So let's start from the beginning here. So let's talk seasons by states, regulations, the basics of folks that are maybe not that experienced in shed hunting, or want to try to get into it a little bit more. What do they need to know out of the gate?
Well, yeah, it's cool you brought that up. Like state regulations are changing within the last, 5 years, 5 to 8 years probably, where some states are putting shed seasons or antler gathering seasons in place. So probably first step, depending on your state and your zone, is to check regulations if there's any restrictions on antler gathering, and also look into like picking up deadheads, because this is naturally going to happen when when you're out there shed hunting. You're typically in wintering zones, you're going to find deadheads. So make sure you probably check your state's regulations and rules first.
Yeah.
So probably go ahead, Martin.
I was gonna say, because especially with deadheads, there could be some really like weird rules on those. Like some, I believe it's if there's hair on the skull, you can't take it. If there's not hair, you can. It like just really weird ones. So it's good. That's a good one to check on, because you will for sure find a deadhead out the winter range.
So like in Utah, for example, you can mark it with a GPS. You're not allowed to move it or manipulate it. And then you can contact the Department of Wildlife. And depending upon timing and availability, oftentimes they'll try to get out there and do an investigation to see, was it a winter kill, or maybe is there a poaching situation happening? And then again, I think it's so much based on timing and maybe the particular, agent that you work with, you may or may not be able to get it back. Again, it's all just super dependent on the situation. Correct?
Yeah. And like for Utah specifically, I've called in a handful myself, and honestly, I've had great success with that. Except for one this last season where, again, availability, they just didn't have time. And by the time they made it to the carcass, the head was gone. Somebody else had taken it. But yeah, they're going to do a thorough investigation, most likely check all the rib cage bones, all the bones, look for damage in the shoulder, use a metal detector to look for either broadheads or bullet fragments. And the way that I kind of understand it is if they can't prove that it was caused by a human, like whether it's poaching, hit by a car, if they come up with a natural cause of death, and you have to also write in either email or letter a request for those antlers back. If they don't, if they can't prove that it was human caused, you should most likely get the head back. And sometimes that's been the full skull. Sometimes that's been antlers chopped at the base. So again, it's kind of like whoever takes care of the case and how they're going to do it.
So just as a bottom line reference for anybody getting started, check with your local fish and game agencies. A quick phone call or search of their regulations will probably tell you a lot what you need to know, just so you got your bases covered. So now that we got the kind of the housekeeping of shed hunting out of the way, let's dive into probably the overarching general question. Like, I want to take my kids hunting. I'd like to go shed hunting my first time. Where do I start?
You want to tackle that, Eric, or
get in on this, and I'll add to it.
I get this message so much too. So my number one thing would be, you got to put in a couple weeks of scouting before the animals drop. Like, find where the animals are at, kind of observe the type of feed that they're feeding on. And, so you can keep looking in those types of areas, but find the animals and then wait for them to shed and then go in and pick up their antlers. That's the best way to have success. Like,
and you're talking like sitting back, kind of glassing, observing, just trying to get an overall idea of maybe where they may be at that point in time of the season. Right. So, I mean, for those, even like, let's take a step back. So obviously it's so dependent on where you live and the different ranges where these elk and deer live, but largely some places, particularly more northern climates, there's the migration of deer and elk and antelope oftentimes, right? So then you got some other more southern type climates, maybe the New Mexicos, the Arizonas of the world, southern Utahs, where there's a lot less of a migration because the winters are super mild and a lot of times you're dealing with next to zero snow, right?
Yeah, definitely. Each type of terrain is definitely going to have a huge play on where. So the number one thing, I don't know how to turn that off. The number one thing, like Martin said, is like where. And it really is all going to depend on where you're at. So we'll try to share our knowledge from the areas we have tried. So for the most part, the animals that we shed hunt here in Utah are migratory. So where they summer, where they rut, and where they shed is most likely very different. And that's why so many people can be like, hey, I've put on 100 miles within the last few weeks. I have found 0 sheds. It's like, clearly you're in the wrong spot, because we'll take a mountain range, and there are going to be places that are on fire for sheds. And there's going to be miles of what we call the dead zone. Like, you might find a random straggler here and there, but to get to the honey holes, whatever you want to call them, sometimes you have to weed out those dead zones and find where they winter. And for a lot of the stuff that I think Martin and I do both, elevation is huge. Mm-hmm. If you're outside, there's just that level of elevation where the conditions were just right for the animal based on snow levels, access to food, and bedding. So scouting, clearly, like Martin said, is super important. Our mule deer shed, I mean, that's the thing. The windows of when they shed is also really big and plays a big factor into how well you're going to do. You go too early, you're not going to find the sheds. It's going to be snow on the ground. The whites are covered up. And you go too late, nothing bad about going too late. There's really no such thing as like really going too late, but more vegetation, more oak brush leaves, more grass, harder to find. So there's kind of that sweet spot, like through probably the last half of March and April, I think is probably the best for the stuff we do around here. But knowing where they were during the times they shed is the key, because if you're not there, you're not going to find sheds. So scouting is definitely very, very, very valuable. And in my earlier days, I'd say I spent more time into scouting than I do now. Now it's kind of knowledge based, like, okay, they love this canyon, they like that canyon, you know, on this mountain range, they like this elevation, and I'll just kind of go based off that. But if you can, get out and scout, use your optics, and find them before they shed.
Okay, so let's talk about elevation real quick, because we've had a few different questions specific to elevation. What exactly are you looking for from an elevation standpoint? Is there like a sweet spot? Let's for purpose of the conversation, let's focus in on elk, just because I think that's probably the most popular, you know, shed hunting there is. So what are you guys looking for from an elevation standpoint? Because that question has come over and over and over.
I've kind of found it depends on the mountain range, whether you're in desert country or northern mountains, because of the snow levels.
Yeah.
But the sevens, anywhere in the sevens has always been pretty good for a general number, 7,000 foot elevation range.
Yeah, like 7,500 seems to be a pretty sweet spot.
Yeah.
But some mountain ranges and some winters, you're going to get them higher or lower. Yeah. But average, 7,500 seems to be pretty good for where we go.
How about topography wise? That's obviously kind of another component of elevation. Do you historically find more sheds? Obviously, I think it's safe to say the south facing slopes are kind of a no-brainer, just because they melt, the snow melts faster, the feed develops a little quicker, there's a better chance of the elk and deer being on there. But with regards to like the topography or the terrain, more rugged, thicker, rockier, like versus open, what, I mean, is there any suggestions on that?
Well, again, you know, Martin and I both are going to be talking about mainly where we are.
Yeah, sure.
Because, you know, we kind of not laugh, but we mentioned some of this northern Idaho stuff, or like Montana, where me and Martin are like, it looks so heavenly, nice grassy slopes, couple pine trees scattered here and there. Like, man, it looks like fun country to shed hunt. The stuff that we seem to do well in, I think it is for a couple different reasons, is rugged. Personally, I like it because it's harder to get to. It's harder to weed them out through the thick brush. But these big mature bulls tend to want to find sometimes the roughest country to recover from the rut. They don't want to be bothered. I'm not saying that there's not the others, right? The easy spots down in the burns or the clear cuts that people make. But the majority of the stuff I like is the rugged terrain where these big old bulls, they want to be left alone. They don't want to be by cattle. They don't like noise. They want to be so out there by themselves. And that's why you find that bigger bulls typically either live by themselves or maybe with one or two other bulls. Where you'll find that middle class age, they really bachelor group up, 6 points, 5 points. They're always in big groups. But those big bulls, they really like rugged terrain, I think.
Yeah.
Martin,
pretty much the
similar?
rougher the better. Yeah.
Rougher better. Yeah.
Yeah. That's, at least for me, and maybe that's because less people go there too. Yeah. So you tend to find more sheds there. And it's just easier to miss an antler maybe in some rough country. So that also plays a role in it. But I would say the bulls do, like, that's where you will find bulls, is in rough, tucked away pockets.
Yeah. Like, I think when me and Martin are sitting back looking at a space, we will literally, and it's not always perfect. Again, everything varies, but we'll be like, no, that's too perfect. It's kind of funny, but what I've been using this word heavenly. I'm like, it's just too heavenly. It's too perfect. You dream that they would be there. You look at it and it's like great grass. And you look over here and you're like oak brush, bushes, thorns, rock slides. And it's like, whoa, that's where we're finding the sheds.
That's funny. I mean, I equate a lot of that to you know, when you're, let's say, chasing elk with a bow and you come into this just heavenly looking area, you're like, oh gosh, this just looks like where elk should be, you know, and then you end up getting into them, maybe some really dumb place that you didn't expect. So there's that kind of visualization of, man, if they were only here, but the reality is they're not. I think the other interesting point that you make is the where to find the more mature bulls. You know, that's right in line with how elk act, right? Post rut, those more mature age class bulls are absolutely finding the darkest, deepest, gnarliest canyons to just chill out. And in many cases, they'll stay there or near all the way through the winter, which is really adding up with kind of where you guys have found some of the maybe more quality, you know, older age class bull sheds. And then another point is, you know, you might find in some of those heavenly areas some smaller sheds, because I think a lot of the younger class bulls still may run around with some of the cows and calves throughout the winter.
Yep.
So that all kind of ties into really just how elk behave overall. So let's talk a little bit about e-scouting. I know, Eric, over the years, you've been really passionate about time spent not only on Onyx maps, but also on Google Earth. You know, you can pull up a spot and have a good idea based on maybe some of your past experience, the elevation. How do you guys leverage e-scouting to help kind of guide you into picking a place?
Well, one way for sure is taking, again, if you're starting from scratch, it's going to be a little more difficult to pinpoint a shed spot e-scouting. At this point where I'm at is I've got all the years of knowledge, all the areas of knowledge, but one thing someone can do who's maybe just getting started is like, all right, I've done good here. What does that look like? Look on Google. Okay, it's a south slope. It's got a lot of grass and oak brush. Where else on this mountain range looks like that? And you know, match the elevation, match the feed, and really e-scouting, you're just like, it's a guess, right? You're like, I think there should be sheds there. And from there, it's just boots on the ground. And sometimes you'll find both. I've found spots where I'm like, it just makes sense. Like I killed it here. This is 2 ridges over, and you go, and again, you're back in the dead zone. You're like, all right, check box, like not good, not even a white, no chalks. But sometimes you can take that knowledge that you have, add e-scouting. Maybe it's a bordering unit, something similar, has the same feed. You try that, and it's like, I'm in the zone. So you're going to want to use the different tools in Onyx. My favorites anyways are access. One, you know, is it public land? Can I get there? If I can get, how close can I get? You know, what's a good route to the spot? And then elevation, like the topo maps are super helpful.
Yeah, just kind of leveraging those topo lines and just understanding where you are in comparison to, you know, where you hope those antlers might be laying.
Yep.
What, Martin, talk about the leverage of the Onyx tracks. I know that's something that you guys use almost obsessively when you're out in the field.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's turned into like one of the biggest tools to finding sheds for us. Like you're walking, you find a nice brown. Now you can mark that location where you found it, and then you can see everywhere you've walked. So you can, what Eric and we've always done it, but what we've really focused on now this year is gridding. So if we find an antler we want to match up, say, now we just grid, and we just can look at our phones and see everywhere we've walked with that blue dotted line, and work up a draw, then go over, miss our tracks just enough, and then come back down the other side. And we've had great success.
That's super interesting, because it honestly reminds me of like when you're on maybe a blood trail, you know, exactly. You're working collectively to really, like, it's a tough blood trail. You're not having any success, and it's time to begin gridding. The track feature and component really is helpful to your point of knowing where you've been and where you need to continue to go, and then comparing and contrasting that with your other friends that might have the same tool on their phone to try to like match up a shed, or, you know, just like trying to find your downed animal.
Yeah, like Martin said, it's, you know, everyone, you know, gridding, like everyone in shed hunting is like, oh yeah, grid. But when you use the Onyx map to do it, like Martin and I have this year. Like, for instance, in this shed tour that's going live right now, we walked across the ridge. We had never been on the ridge. We had e-scouted it and again thought, hey, this makes sense. Like, we did good over here, but this is like, 5-10 miles this way, but it kind of looks the same and it has the same slopes. And so we go hit it. And, first thing we do is we're trying to find that sweet spot. We're going down the ridge. It's like, okay, there are tracks. Like, everything is starting to add up, like seeing elk sign, old old droppings, new droppings. So you kind of start to think, okay, they've been here year after year, wintering year after year. You want to look for not just fresh sign, but like take into consideration old sign. That's great. Especially in really wintering areas, there's just going to be a lot of sign. And we went across, I just remember this one particular little draw. We went across it. Martin found one small brown and I glassed a nice brown on the other side. Hit it and carried on. Started finding sheds again on other ridges, but decided the next day that we would go back into this area and grid. And I'm talking tight lines. Like, we're trying not to miss anything. And we just started gridding using Onyx. Okay, you're going to use like, all right, the backbone to the wash. It's kind of typically what we do. So line down, line all the way down. And we started finding sheds that we literally walked past the day before.
Sure.
Like, dang close. And if you didn't have your track to kind of know, you always know where you were, but you really don't. I'm learning that with the Onyx, I'm actually able to see where I was. Not just, I was kind of right there somewhere. It's like, no, I haven't been here. And like one in particular, Martin found this big heavy bull on a sunny side, and we gridded that side and matched up a couple bulls, small ones. And we're just like, that big one's got to be in here. So I gridded this thing all the way up the sunny side, nothing. All the way down, nothing. And on the last line in between mine and Martin's last line, because now you can share your tracks, text them to each other, which we do often. So we know we're not going to waste our time walking over each other's tracks. On that one line that hadn't been hit, in between his highest and my lowest, boom, there's the match.
Yeah, it was crazy.
So yeah, the tools are super helpful. And I've found myself on the mountain at times being like, am I wasting, like I pull that thing out like you wouldn't believe. I look at Onyx, like I save all my phone battery. Like, I'm going airplane mode, shutting down all my apps, no texts, no phone calls, just so I can milk all my battery, just so I can have a battery daylight to dark, just to use the Onyx map. And I've found myself at some points being like, am I wasting time pulling out my phone? Should I just be motoring like hard charge, like just get on miles. That will work. But each time I'd pull out my phone and be like, oh, I need to be a little lower. And all of a sudden it's like, bam.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, you guys are just working way more strategically. So for those of you guys listening that are not familiar with Onyx Maps, we'll give you a shameless plug. It is a partner of ours, but it's truly a tool that we use all the time, whether it's shed hunting, scouting, big game hunting, you name it. We always have that with us. So if you are familiar with the product, you used it, then you know what we're talking about. But maybe you're not as familiar with it, you can check out Onyx. You can use code HUSH, save yourself 20% on the purchase, and you can buy either individual states that show your access, the topography, the offline maps is kind of what these guys are talking about, as well as the track features, just a lot of good components. Or you can buy the Elite package, which gives you access to all 50 states for those that like to get out and travel around and hunt in a lot of different places. But certainly a great tool that's, because of the technology, it's helping you guys just be more strategic when you're out looking for sheds.
Yeah, it's fun. Save your track. I save all my tracks.
Yeah.
I save my waypoints, all marked sheds. Again, you're just building that data. And I was never like this before. VMAC was always Mr. Data. Like, he had water holes saved, and here was a wallow, and I'm like, what's it really matter? But now I'm seeing, like, you save that data.
Yeah.
Year after year, you can start collect. Okay, let's go see what elevation that was at when I did good. Oh, hey, this makes sense. So you just start saving data.
For sure.
So it's just fun to look at.
Eric kind of touched on it a little bit, but Martin, talk about the sign that you guys are looking for. That's another common question when you're out trying to verify if a spot that maybe you found online or that you anticipated might be good is good. When you get out there, what are you looking for?
Looking for droppings, beds, like we call them rodeo grounds, where it's tore up. Like if elk are living in an area, they will tear it up. So if you're not seeing much sign, the ground's not tore up, then chances are it's not, there's not a high population of elk in that area. So it's always reassuring if you can get into an area and see a lot of track, ground tore up, droppings. That's one thing to always go for. So if we're bouncing on ridges trying to find that sweet spot, if we're not seeing sign, we'll just keep going until we're like, elk are here, or
And then
elk were here.
Eric mentioned old sign too, right? Talk about why that might be valuable.
Yeah, so year after year, if it's some of these spots where they're migratory, their wintering range tends to be pretty beat up, especially if you got a good number of elk wintering in a spot. You're going to see old droppings, old rubs. Bulls still like to rub their antlers even through the winter months. They'll still even spar and break their antlers all the way up to the time they shed. Just bulls being bulls, you know. So yeah, old beds, new beds. I love all. Like I want to see years worth of droppings. I don't just need to see the fresh sign. Fresh sign's obviously going to let you know, hey, they were here this year. And again, every mountain could be different based off its snow levels. But where we really seem to do well is just like Martin said, lots of sign. The dirt is tore up. There's consistent rubs and beds that are like smashed out, but also like layers of poop.
Yeah.
Like literally,
Yeah.
you find areas like a ridge or a saddle, very popular bedding spots will just have years worth of sign built up.
And then also going off of the years of sign or a lot of sign, you got to take into account like what time of year it is that you're out looking. So now here we are mid-April. You're looking for, if you want to find the browns, you know, you're going to be looking for sign that's a month old. So if you're seeing a bunch of sign and it's all fresh from that day, April 20th, you might be in the wrong area, possibly. Maybe that's where they're at now. And a month ago, they were another mile or two down the canyon because of snow levels. So that's also something to take into account.
That's a good point.
Time of year.
Let's talk a little bit about glassing. I know there's a couple, you know, there's, like Eric said, there's the type of folks that like to just get out, do the death hikes, cover country and find them that way. And then there's maybe some other type of people that are more interested in the glassing. So what's your strategy when it comes to glassing sheds?
Well, similar to looking for bucks or bulls, you just want to get on a high vantage point. My favorite is to glass the south slopes, or the more popular sunny side of the slope, whatever that might be, east or west facing, depending on what side of the mountain range they're on. And scan, and just like you would walk it, grid it with your binoculars. Me and Martin talked about this the other day. Like, what's the rundown when you start glassing? And I think both of us kind of were like, we love to just hit those obvious spots real quick because you're pretty excited. So you're like, I'm going to glass like the meadow, like underneath the trees. You know, there's always like the rodeo grounds we talk about. So I'll get high. I'll glass the easy really quick, looking for the easy spots, the gimmies. We call them the gimmies, like out in the wide open, whole thing just sitting there. And then from there, really start to slow down. You're going to have to slow down. And to get really good at this, you're going to have to really understand shapes, size, and color. You know, both white and brown and chalk. Like you'll start to get good. Like, that one's kind of gray. That's probably a chalk. Hey, that one's bone white. That's last year's, or that's brown, obviously. So for me, it's just get high, slow down, grab a snack, grab a water bottle, just relax. And just as if you were looking for animals, just start to pick it apart, starting at the obvious stuff first, and then all the way into like, don't overlook anywhere, because they'll shed in the most random spots. But again, we like the obvious spots, easy spots you can see, and then you slow down and pick over the brush and the beds or whatever.
So Martin, how about for you? Do you incorporate the use of a tripod on binoculars or anything of those nature for just trying to be a little more efficient?
I like the binos on the trekking pole setup. So
Okay.
same thing, but just you can kick the weight of the tripod by doing that. So, but yeah, I agree. I think, and then a scope as well if you can for longer distance. But yeah, you get to a ridge or a high point, sit down, start glassing, and like usually the first shed I glass up, it'll be 15 minutes into glassing that one hillside, and I'll be like, oh, I already looked there, and I missed it. But it's
Yeah.
because you're usually breathing pretty heavy, you're excited, eyes are moving around quick when you get to a new face. But then once you've kind of settled down and then started picking it apart, things will start standing out to you.
Yeah, pretty funny story on that. So again, if you can take a tripod and you prefer that, like by all means, dude, heck yeah. The steadier you are, the better. I'm usually running off my knees, and again, we're trying to like cut weight, so tripod's usually first to go. There's plenty of trips I've gone specifically on glassing shed hunts. You pack the scope, you pack the tripod, you know you're going to hit it hard with the binos, and then you know you're going to zoom in and hit some of that further distance stuff and pick it apart even better with the scope. I find them both ways. Every time I take a scope, I typically find sheds through the scope. Martin's really good at that, just hours and hours on scope. But funny story on the whole glassing thing is Martin and I had, we're on a shed hunt. We found this steep canyon. We had glassed some shed bowls the day before. We're like, dude, we need to get it over there, man. It's nasty. It's really steep. And so we're on, this side of the canyon glassing the sunny side. And Martin had already we had both been on that side already. Okay. So we already know the lines we took. We know we glassed a couple the day before, but looking this way, we glassed some bowls, but we figured looking that way, we'd probably glass some more we didn't see. So we're sitting down. I'm on the 18s with a tripod. I picked out a couple, right? I was like, dude, there's one way far away. And I had one spotted, confirmed. And Martin's like, man, whenever you get a chance, dude, you got to plate in the 18s down here, down to the right. I got a white, I think. I'm like, dude, I don't know. Like, I don't know. It kind of looks like a tree branch. So I just carried on with my day, and he was kind of like wanting a chance to look in the 18s to just confirm. I'm like, dude, it's not. So I'm still going on, and he pulls up his binos again. So he's already looked over this spot a number of times. This is most common is you already glass there and then you spot it for some reason. Something sticks out, the color, the G1, a Royal. And he goes, dude, I'm looking at that thing I told you should have confirmed for me. If you would have just looked at it, you would have saw the brown right behind it. And I'm like, I take the 18s. I'm like, holy crap. I've already scanned it with my 10s and confirmed I thought it was a branch. But for whatever reason, that next time Martin went down, he spotted a nice brown 6-point elk shed. He's like, if you would have just taken the 18s to confirm the white was a tree branch, you would have most likely glassed the brown. And I was like, dang it, dude, I missed my chance to like face crush him. So he total face crushed me.
So Martin, you get to keep that one then, right? Because
I kept that one.
Oh, he had to walk. I wasn't about to cross that canyon that day. We were beat down after like 2 or 3 days already. That was that snowy trip, and it was like day 3. I'm like, I ain't crossing that.
But overall, though, I mean, it's almost like an observation mission. You're going there and saying, okay, there's enough here that it's worthy to come back and like go collect them now.
Exactly, right. And for glassing for me, it's beneficial because just like that story, we glassed a side of the canyon that Martin had already hit. And we glassed, I think you spotted like 3 just below the level you had last touched. So again, it's glassing a shed to me is, one, you're going to glass a lot more country than you're ever going to walk. So you're going to glass sheds you may not find on the ground just by walking that hill. And 2, or 3 or whatever, it's always going to put you in position to find more sheds. So for every shed you glass, just think there's probably 1 or 2 you can't see over there. And many times I've glassed a single, walked over there, boom, around the bush, the match. It's like, how did I not see it? But glassing is all about angles. So one thing I've also learned is just like glassing up wildlife at all, every angle is going to give you different perspective. So we're constantly glass, move, glass, move, glass, move.
Yep.
So we'll have, me and Martin will be on ridge at different elevation, glassing up different antlers. Sometimes we can see the same one, but oftentimes you're like, I can just see the 1 and the 2, 50 yards down the hill. Can't see it.
Yeah. That's a great point that
Yeah.
is equally valuable when you're looking for live animals out hunting. Just changing up that location, even oftentimes by 10 or 15 yards, makes a huge difference in just what you can see. And maybe how the light's reflecting through certain trees or brush, just in a way that like allows you to pick up an antler tip, for example. So you talked, guys, a little bit about being able to kind of glass different types of elk sheds. Obviously, for those of you seasoned pros that are listening, this is going to be old news. But for the folks just getting started, what are like the grading systems, if you will, on elk sheds? And then on top of that, like, what are they worth?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because it's changed a little bit over time. Back when I first started selling, which so many people assume that all shed hunters are like trying to get rich. Not going to work. Like, I'll tell you right now, unless you have country that you can consistently hit 5 to 10 sheds a day, it's going to be real tough to be a full-time shed hunter. You get that a lot. Like, I can't believe, how much money do you make? It's not about that whatsoever. But when I was young, I would sell sheds literally for the sole purpose to get more money, to pay for more gas, to go find more sheds.
Yeah.
Like, because that's how much fun it is. Anyways, back in the day, I remember selling sheds from $3 to $5 a pound, like even the Browns, and they would even grade them back then as like Brown A, no broken points. Brown B would be like broken points. You wouldn't get as much for broken points. So that was always weird back then. I don't know if that was because a lot of it was using for like home decor or whatever. But right now, the market is a little down, but they do grade them for 3 ways for elk. Brown, which is grade A, hard white, which is going to be about a 1-year-old shed that will most likely have hairline cracks, like really thin. And then there's chalk. So anything that's starting to really get wide cracks or like a gray tone or like a sandpaper fill, those are going to be graded as chalk.
So really 3 grades as far as it comes to the money side. So what's the market at these days, let's say, for top of the line brown elk sheds? I mean, obviously this is like it's like a commodity, right? It changes based on supply and demand.
Right. Yeah, like right now the numbers I've been hearing is 13 to 15, somewhere in there for brown antlers, but I do think the numbers or that price is going down just with the whole coronavirus deal.
Yeah.
But that's usually where it sits at. And then as you get to white and chalk, it goes down dramatically.
Right. So historically, obviously this year's a little bit of an anomaly with what's going on, but like when people are buying those antlers, what you mentioned home decor, what else are they being used for?
Yeah. So the way I understand it, which a lot of buyers, they might have different connections for where they're selling them, but like people that want to use them or buy them for chandeliers, they might approach an antler buyer like, hey, I need a dozen 6-point elk antlers that are all left sides, that main beams are all 40 to 45 inches, right? So they're kind of hand picking, and because of that, they're going to pay a premium. Yep. One thing that's driving the market up for the last few years is organic antler dog chews.
Yeah.
So that's a big market. You go to PetSmart or you go to anywhere and you see a dog, like, a piece of antler this big for $20. It's like, whoa. So that's driving the market up, if I understand it correctly. A lot of the chalk and other random ones are going to be sold overseas. They will grind them up, use them for medications, aphrodisiacs, etc.
Yeah. Super interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. The dog chew market really is I think is what's brought it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just over the years, sure, more and more people are getting into the organic dog chews. Mm-hmm. All right, we are starting to wrap up. Do you want to take a couple of questions potentially off the IG just to answer those?
Yeah, you got some or?
No, I don't have any. I just rolled through all the ones I had from Facebook and YouTube. So for those of you guys that were on the YouTube community page, we appreciate the feedback, the questions. Hopefully we've answered a fair amount for you. And, this is something still new to us. So apologies for, dogs barking or glitchy audio or whatever it might be. That's just kind of part of the new game we're playing here as we're all home trying to create some new content.
Yeah, here's some questions coming up on IG. Again, if you guys don't follow us on Instagram at Get Hushin, give us a follow. So a lot of this stuff we've covered. We'll just kind of go for some funny ones. This guy says, "What's the best lunch to have while shed hunting?"
That's a great one.
Such a routine for me and Martin when we go on these trips. It's literally, we laugh about this because it's like we know the program. Like we get the same foods every single time: Ritz crackers, tuna packets, Bumblebee tuna boxes, granola bars, Pop-Tarts,
Nutter Butters, Cuties.
You guys are so predictable.
Gushers. And
Gummy bears, huh, Martin?
He gets gummy bears. I added in Scooby-Doo, like snacks from Jordan Harbertson. He always had some in his backpack, and these are really good. Cheez-Its. So, and a lot of the stuff where we're packing like a night lunch as well, we've moved to canned foods just because they're kind of heavy to begin with, but they don't take from our water supply.
Yeah.
So if you have access to water, that's not a big deal. But sometimes the places we're running, it's like, well, we conserve water as much as we can. So yeah, best lunch, like oysters and Ritz crackers. That's what's up.
That's a good question.
I like the lunch on the run tuna. There's a tuna can. It comes with the crackers, and then you could even get one that comes with a cookie and a fruit cup too. Those are my favorite.
Here's a cool
like you're
question.
Just back in grade school.
Yeah, like dude. Yeah, going back to how hard you work physically with shed hunting I'd say for Martin and I both. Martin spends a lot of time summer scouting, so I know he runs his body down pretty good. But when we're out there, dude, the amount of miles and just pushing through brush and carrying, 5, 6, 7 sheds and on this steep terrain, I come back from shed trips, easily lose like 5 to 8 pounds.
Yeah, you guys burn a lot of calories, particularly when you've had a good trip and you're having to pack those heavy sheds out of big canyons. No doubt about that.
So yeah, we're, like you said, we're basically living on snack food. This guy asked, how late into the year will you guys go shed hunting? Cool thing about shed hunting is there's no real season. Sometimes I refer to the season, like on social media, and people are like, there's no season, like hardcore people go all year, which you can. But obviously right now is the best time, right? Yeah. Through April into May is great. Depending on where you're at, May, June, July is just so hot. Last year, Martin and I went pretty late, and I'd say that's mostly because our late winter.
Yeah,
our last year was a fall. Heavy winter. Everything pushed us out pretty late, but I say late May. Not only does we just get beat out by the heat, the bugs, the grass, it's hard, it's just thick. My mind, at least for me, my mind starts to shift to shooting my bow, summer scouting the velvet. So it's not that I don't want to shed hunt all year. I'll always find sheds, but it's just me personally, I go hard in the spring. And then as my mind shifts in those early summer months, I find more joy in like getting ready for the hunt.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up here. I'm going to have you guys each give one last maybe tip or piece of advice. Martin, why don't you start us off?
Okay, wow. I would say to not get discouraged by lack of finding sheds, or if you're seeing people tracks and whatnot, because that's one thing, like, everyone always says, like, oh, I went to a spot, but it's already been hit by people. Well, there's always white antlers every year that have been missed, and it's easy to miss antlers. Like we've said, we've hit ridges and picked up a couple, and then started glassing back and saw, oh, we walked by 3.
Yeah.
So don't get discouraged by not finding sheds, or if you see people tracks. Antlers are always out there. Yes, you'll learn to as you go out more, like we said, the best feed is, the best places to go. And as you develop all that knowledge, then you'll start to limit your unsuccessful days. But just to keep a high spirit and just have fun with it, and don't let yourself get down, because there's always antlers to be found.
Yeah, one thing from observing social media myself is when you see people that are really good at it, or, you know, you just see someone's out and like them and their friends were out all weekend, and they show their stack. It's like usually the majority of the antlers they're finding are white, which only tells me there's always sheds on the ground, which there is. There's way more than we'll ever find. So my last words is just have fun with it. Like shed hunting is no one's job. It's not our job. We're not depending on it. It's literally just a fun activity to get out and enjoy public land or private land, but just to enjoy the outdoors. And a lot of people are, you know, nowadays are, oh, it's ruined. It's so competitive. And if that's the mindset you have, yeah, you're not going to have as much fun. If you're all wound up about someone was parked on that last corner, then you're just not going to enjoy it. So shed hunting should be just about getting out, having fun, you know, relax a little. It's always the first few weeks of the best time for elk that I even find myself wound up. Where do I need to go? Oh, so-and-so is going to hit this canyon on, you know, Saturdays are going to get pounded. We got to hit it on Friday. And I'm just like, blah, you know, and I sometimes have to go, just relax, dude. Yeah. Martin is the best of this. He is so chill. He's not worried about nothing, but just have fun with it. Shed hunting is just a good time. There's a lot of antlers to be found out there. There's always some to be found. Don't get discouraged, and have fun.
I love it. I love it. I appreciate you guys dropping some insights and some knowledge. Hopefully those of you guys listening and watching on YouTube have pulled something out of it that could be beneficial. If you have not already, do us a favor, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're going to have a lot more shed videos coming out over the coming weeks before we start transitioning into summer scouting, shooting our bows like Eric mentioned. And make sure you go give us a follow on Instagram. It's at @Hushin. Can't thank you guys enough for the support, and let us know in the comments, like we mentioned last week, if you have other ideas, other topics that may be of interest, whether that be hunting related, gear related, storytelling, you name it, whatever you come up with. We'll do our best to try to knock these out while time is still kind of limiting us to be home more so than we'd like to in the spring. Hope you guys are all staying safe, and we will see you guys on the next podcast. Thanks for watching.